Drive at 5 on the intellectualradio.com/iHeartRadio station. I'm your host, Roman Morrow, and we have a good show planned for you today. Don't forget to stay tuned to intellectualradio.com/iHeartRadio station for Warriors Talk with my girl, Rochelle, at 6 p.m. Tonight, my guest is the former ABC 7 and CBS 2 news anchor. Now he is the substitute news anchor for talk show radio WLS and a consultant. Please give a Drive at 5 welcome back to the one and only Rob Johnson. Welcome back to the job, sir.
Roman, it is great to be with you. And I'm just, when we worked together years ago in TV, and then you're doing this now, I'm just so proud of the direction you've gone and trying to inform people and doing it on a regular basis. And I know you get some great guests here, so I'm just trying to live up to the previous guests that you've had here.
Earl is just going to cue that up over and over.
That's it. There's your promo for the next year, Roman. You're welcome.
So please give intellectualradio.com/iHeartRadio station an update since the last time you were on the drive.
So last time I was on the drive, I think I'd left TV and I just started my Rob Johnson communications career. And so and fortunately for me, it's really taken off. And I spent about 75-80% of my time doing my client work for Rob Johnson Communications, the communications firm I own. And then I spent about a quarter of my time working for other communications companies, marketing and strategy firms that will hire me by the project. So one of them, I'm a senior strategist at Strategy Consulting. Lissa Druss, who used to be a producer at CBS years before my time, actually runs it. She went and did strategy work for years and then opened her own shop probably 4 or 5 years ago. And then I also work pretty regularly with the Harbinger Group, which is also a marketing and strategy firm. In fact, Eileen Rochford, the CEO, and I have a podcast called Can You Hear Me that airs, twice a month. So I really enjoy doing that. And between filling in on radio on occasion and doing the podcast, I feel like I've really been able to scratch the creative itch. And so I like it. And I love doing my communications work for all my clients.
You are back in the broadcasting scene of things. You are substituting on WLS Talk Radio for Big John Howe morning show. How did that happen, you substituting for Big John Howe?
So anyway, Big John does afternoons. Steve Cochran does the mornings, and I know both of them pretty well. And in a few years back, their program director asked me if I'd like to fill in, and I'm like, yeah, I'd love to fill in. And so it happens once or twice a month. And it's not something, especially I was doing the morning show the last 2 weeks, 2 days each week. And I mean, that's getting up at 3:30. It's, getting to the station by 4:30. And then when that shift would be over, the morning shift at 9 o'clock, then I'd be like, oh gosh, I got to take care of all my clients now. So it made for some long days, but I love doing it creatively. I like doing it. I like collaborating with the people, certainly most recently on the morning show, his co-host, Jane Munzer as Klaus, and Nick Gale and various people of that nature. So I like doing it. And they let me do whatever show I want to do. I want to do an authentic Chicago show, and I get guests on that are interesting. And I know sometimes people get heavy into the politics on that, and I'm not really a political animal. So for me, I just do an authentic Chicago show, and I call them like I see them, like I did on TV for all those years.
How did you get adjusted from an all television broadcast to an all talk format?
No, I think it's interesting because I was able to, you don't have to be in full makeup and suit and tie and looking, immaculate. And, but at the same time,
nowadays you do.
Nowadays, for radio, yeah, you do now. But the thing I like about it is you have to be well read, and you have to be able to carry a show. You have to be able to have something interesting to say, and you have to keep the conversation going. And so the thing I like about it is it taxes a different part of your brain. When somebody says, hey, you need to, you're doing a talk show for 3.5 hours, that's a lot different than, hey, you're doing a heavily scripted 30-minute newscast 3 times a day. And I'm not demeaning that at all, because that was a great job for many years, and it fed my family and all of that sort of thing. But I like the challenge of getting a lot out of guests and not always being in a hurry. On TV, it's like, oh gosh, you got 10 seconds, and then you got 5 seconds to talk, and then we got to go to commercial, this and that. And in this format here, the one we're doing today, we're able to explore. I'm able to talk for 30 seconds or 45 or a minute, and we're not sitting here like, oh, got to go to break.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Well, it depends on how much I get talking here. You might say, Rob, we got to go to break. Please be quiet.
Now, you have been in television business for some time now, and you have seen the best and worst in broadcasting. I am saying this because it seems like radio and television broadcasting is moving backwards with tabloid reporting styles instead of telling the story. It's all about getting the story first instead of fact checking. You have more corrections on news broadcasting than ever before that usually don't happen back in the day with false tales. Your thoughts on moving backwards in tabloid journalism?
So for people that are watching on Facebook right now, I'm holding up my iPhone. The competition from this has changed the game for broadcasters, because you're competing with social media. You're competing with all these apps that are on this magical device that we have our noses planted in all the time. And because of that, the profit margins aren't what they used to be. And TV stations used to have ridiculously high profit margins, and they keep losing market share because they're competing against their phones, against social media, against other forms of entertainment or journalism. And I will say this to answer your question in a different way too. I will say this as somebody who is, who tends to his clients and is trying to make them, put them in the best possible light now. I would say that, and I know there are a lot of great journalists out here. I see the ABC7 newscast on in the other room right now, and there are lots of great journalists. And I'm not saying that everybody does this, but what I have run into personally are a lot more journalists than journalists. Because sometimes they'll say, you know what, I always had to get two sides of the story. I always had to, fact check and make sure that was right. And sometimes people come into a story and they got one point of view that they want to get across to their readers, listeners, or viewers. And I'm not saying that about any particular station. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. I'm saying it exists far more than it did. The whole idea of getting two sides of the story, the whole idea about being impartial, which I always thought was like part and parcel of what I did.
It was like a Bible at one point.
It was, but now a lot of people that come up in this business now understand, you can make a headline, you take a position before you even do the story, and that's what happens a lot. And I'm saying that based upon the experience I've had with clients here and there, who you're like, oh, so and so just called, and you're like, oh, I know what their point of view is before they even do the story. That's happening more and more. I don't want to say that it's happening, large scale and everybody's doing it. I'm saying that kind of thing didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago, and now it does.
It is hard to report on politics nowadays because you can't ask the tough questions. If you have a Democrat on, which I have all the time, and ask them a tough question, they think I'm a Republican. If I have a Republican on, if I ask them a tough question, they think I'm a Democrat. Instead of seeking the truth and asking the tough questions, to be fair, there's no fairness in the game because it's either one side or the other, or none at all.
This is precisely why for years, and when I was in this, and to this day, I never registered with a political party because I didn't want anybody to go to the voter rolls. And if I was asking a Democrat a tough question one day, or I ask a Republican a tough question the next day, they're like, I knew it. I knew that guy was a Democrat. I knew he was a Republican. And that's what people have done. I've seen things come out in the last couple of years that named all the journalists and what political party they were affiliated with here in Chicago. As you might imagine, most of them are Democrats, but not all of them. I never wanted that to happen because you do have to ask tough questions, and people don't like tough questions. And like, oh, not Roman, he's a Republican. Oh, he's a Democrat. All I'm saying is, if you ask somebody a tough question and they think you're the other side of the aisle, that means you're asking the right questions. That means you're making them uncomfortable. You're allowed to make, with our public officials, you're allowed to make them uncomfortable. You need to be respectful. You need to be appreciative that they took the time to walk in your studio here and talk to you. But that's existed for a long time. What I think has changed, though, is you ask a question and politicians, I don't even want to say they're good at it. They just do it a lot more. They just answer whatever their talking points are for that day. Is, you could say, hey, what's your what do you think we need to do about the economy? And they'll say the sky is blue and the birds are chirping. And you're like, you got to answer the question though. And so I think what's more common now is people are willing to go on the offensive and try to make you sweat. If you're asking a tough question and they're the ones in this seat, they need to be answering that question. And a lot of times people have gotten comfortable with like, well, why are you asking me that? What are you, a Roman? Are you a Republican or a Democrat or whatever it is? I just think people are a little bit more bold. But that whole idea of asking somebody a question and they think that, if you're asking a Democrat a question, they think you're Republican and vice versa. That's existed for a long time. And that's why I've never registered with a political party. That's why I've always been an independent, even to this day, even servicing clients, even having opinions on things. It made it far less complicated for me.
Brandon Johnson is now mayor of Chicago. The inaugural happened. What is your take on the inauguration?
Well, listen, I mean, it's a time to celebrate, and by all accounts, the things that I saw and read today, it's fairly conciliatory, even in an environment where we aren't such conciliatory people, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on. So I think when you have an inauguration of a new mayor, you have hope. You have hope it's going to be better than it was. And we have so many issues in Chicago that are pressing. And I think we all know what they are. But I think everybody's hoping, no matter what political stripes Brandon Johnson has, no matter where he came from, in his political growth, everybody's hoping that he's going to make this city better than it's been. And sadly, I would say it's been trending in the wrong direction for several years. And so I would just say, hey, give the guy a chance, no matter where you stand on him. You like him, you don't like him, whatever the case is. I mean, we all have a vested interest that Brandon Johnson is going to work with aldermen and alderwomen, and he's going to get the job done, and he's going to work, he's going to provide the best possible service he can, and he's going to keep us safe, and he's going to provide opportunity for people that need opportunity. So today's a day, maybe a short-lived honeymoon, if you will, but today's a day where we're like, oh, you gave a, speech, and it's like
everybody is saying that. I'm going to put your political analyst hat on for a second. Everybody is saying it's short-lived because of the crime, because of the so-called inflation. The immigration issue is one of the biggest issues that's draining the resources in Chicago. And some people are saying that you got to pick one in order to get the city back on track.
I think if you pick one, and all the ones you expressed are all real, but the beautiful thing and the tough part at the same time of being the mayor is you don't get to pick one. You better be working on about 3 or 4 of them, and you better be moving us in the right direction. And I know that's what people have a hope for, that he'll be able to do that. And for people, during the campaign, they talk about defunding police and this and that. In Chicago, people want to be safe. They just do. No matter what your political persuasion, I don't think that matters what political party you're in. People want to be safe. They want a police department that doesn't overstep its bounds, but they want to know that they're providing the service to keep everybody safe, because that's a huge issue, as we know, based on how much attention it got during the mayoral primary and runoff.
What are your thoughts on reporting the news in today's society?
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, it seems like a lot of people, in a world full of clicks and being, being controversial, sometimes it's easier to say certain things. But reporting the news, and I know I sound like, oh, who's the old guy on the radio? I mean, it's for me, it's like, just report the news, because the reason I think it's important just to report the news is when I did TV and I would look into that camera, I wasn't, you might imagine somebody that's friendly to kind of give you the right frame of mind, but I also knew I couldn't assume who was or wasn't watching. Some people might be like me. They might live where I live. They might have had similar backgrounds to me, but there may be, and there certainly were a lot of people that came from different backgrounds, different walks of life. So I could never assume, hey, we all agree that, You can never do that because there's all kinds of people watching. And because that was important to me, I wanted to make sure that I played it down the middle. Did I upset people? Absolutely. Did I go out of my way to upset them? I didn't. But I tried to be fair with everybody. I wanted people to know that.
But it's hard to be fair to everyone and everybody. It's hard to be fair. The reason why I'm saying it's hard to be fair is because of the couple of questions I asked, the tough questions. It's hard when you're in the broadcasting business or even analytical. It's hard to be fair nowadays because they're saying, well, you were too aggressive on this person. And you ask the same question to that person where your tone was different than the last person.
Listen, if you're in the public eye, if you're talking into a microphone right now, if you're in front of a camera, if you're if you're writing a column in a newspaper or a blog or whatever, there are always going to be people that have opinions, and sometimes they're not going to align with what you think is the right thing to do. And it's tougher now. And so what I would say is, when you're doing something, you need to be in the moment. But I know a lot of people, and again, for the people that are watching on Facebook, I'm looking into my phone and it's like, oh, what are they saying about me on Twitter? That can't define what you do. Are they going to beat me up on Twitter? They're going to beat me up on another social media outlet? Perhaps. I mean, I hope I don't get beat up, today, but I feel like I'm, answering these questions as honestly as I can. But the thing about it is, you have a guiding principles. Whatever your guiding principles are, they may not be exactly like mine, and that's okay. But if you have them, you're going to be okay. And if you're just sitting here trying to play gotcha or ask a question and pick a 5-second soundbite where they said something really stupid, your guest, first of all, you're going to have a hard time getting guests on. And second of all, yeah, you might get a few more clicks. People are like, oh my gosh. And then you're going to be controversial. And some people are going to love you and some people are going to hate you. And the thing about social media in this day and age is everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an opinion. Does it mean the opinions are 100% valid? No. I mean, even filling in on morning radio, for goodness sakes, people would weigh in with some kind of mean and hateful stuff. And I was like, really? They're listening to this so they can find a way to be offended, so they can give their input on things? Unfortunately, that's how some people consume their content. So they can be a critic, so they can knock you down. And
make money off of it.
Some people don't make money off it. Some people just sit there trolling you. So some people are just have an opinion. No matter what words come out of your mouth, I'm going to pick the 3 things that might be moderately offensive, Roman, and then I'm just going to, undercut you. That's sadly, that's a lot of the times that's the world we live in right now.
Some people say there is a racial component in the headlines today, making people feel particularly about other people, other ethnicities, alleged crime. Give you some examples. Getting with the New York incident, the Michael Jackson impersonator on the subway received national headline news. The headline basically says mental illness, blah, 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 was digging in his background, so forth and so on. The guy was the victim. However, when it comes to the opposite, let's say you, Rob Johnson, I'm not saying you have or anything, but let's say you did something, an allege or something like that. They say former TV news anchor committed a crime versus Roman Morrow committed a heinous act. This has been going on for quite some time in the news business with the headlines, even with the chroma key but on the side of their shoulder. You see the picture. but some describe their racial ethnicity, some do not. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you should be uniform. I think if you talk about one person in a certain way, you need to talk about another person in a certain way. So if it's Rob Johnson, former TV news anchor, then it's, Roman Morrow, radio host, and that's it. The point I'm trying to make is I just think that I hear what you're saying, and I know that what I ascribe it to a lot of times is laziness people might have. Like they don't even think about that graphic behind, over the shoulder graphic or whatever it might be, not understanding how offensive it could be to others. And what I would say now, and this is not a perfect world by any stretch, I can tell you that I personally, especially with clients that I saw and just, being a consumer of news, I saw a change after the George Floyd thing. I'm not saying it's perfect. And I know there's a lot of emotion around things of that nature, but people are now thinking, take that extra second, take that extra 3 seconds and think about how others might feel about you. I don't say it happens all the time. I can tell you personally, it's made it's made me think about, how do I feel about this? How do I express this? And can I understand why somebody might be offended if they saw something of the nature, of which you speak? And I think that's where we need to keep going, though. We need to keep going there. And some people say, oh, it's woke, or it's this, or it's that. If anything gets out of control, it's not good. But in context, being thoughtful, being fair to other people, and not, describing them in a way that is offensive to them or people that know them or love them, that's not asking too much. It's not.
When it comes to reading the news, or let's say talk about the news, some people would say, I didn't write that. I'm just reading the news. Let's put on your anchor hat now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a word in there, and some words slip. Would you say, who in the heck put this in the script?
Well, first of all, if you said something offensive on the air, I hope you would correct it right away. That's first and foremost, because maybe lots of people heard it, and there's probably going to be a lot of people that are offended by it. So I think the first thing you need to do, if you catch it and if you recognize it, is that you apologize or you make a correction on the air. The sooner the better. The second thing I would do is I would kick myself, because the thing you have to understand is, because of union rules here in Chicago, if I participated in a story and I'm anchoring the news, I could write every word of it. So when we would do a special report and I'm reading the lead in and I report on the whole story, I can write all of that. On a daily basis, most of the stories that are written have to be written by writers, producers, other people, and you can't be the anchor and write every word. Now you can go edit, you can change it and make it more the style that you use. You don't want to change it, where it takes things out of context or it's factually incorrect or whatever the case may be. But I would take ownership and say, I can't let that happen. I'm another layer to make sure that this story is reported responsibly and fairly. And if it snuck by me, then shame on me. And then probably later, and I know not everybody thinks this way, somebody would go blame somebody right away and be like, oh, somebody else wrote it and this or that. I would have a conversation with the person that wrote it and be like, what were you thinking? It wouldn't be in front of the newsroom in front of 30 people to embarrass them. It would be in a private office and be like, what are you doing? Like, I need your help. We're all pulling together. This is a collaborative effort. We can do better. And it starts with the person writing the story, but it also goes to an executive producer that's looking it over, an anchor that's looking it over. I mean, nobody usually writes anything unless it's like breaking news or this just in or whatever, which is very rare, where nobody's had a chance to be checks and balances on it. So everybody shares some of the blame. And I've seen on-air people before, like, blame the producer, blame the writer, whatever the case is. And the thing is, they pay you good money to cover up for those things. And I mean, to not, for not blaming somebody else, but taking ownership of it. That's what I mean by, covering that up, making it not as big a deal as it might normally be. But you own it. If you touched it, you own it. even if you didn't write it. If you were supposed to read it over before you went on the air and said it, you're part owner of that. You're part owner of that screw up. And then you need to make it right as soon as you can.
What about trust? You trust the writers, you trust the producers. They say, here you go, you got to read this on air, and you only have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think with anything you do, and news anchoring is one example of just preparation, you would certainly want to look it over. But the people that are writing the news, the people that are producers, that are writers, are people that are your friends, people you've worked side by side with for a while, and people that you've gained trust with. And so my hope is whatever mess up occurred, if it does, is hardly ever happens. That's my hope. And that the other 99.6% of the time, they're doing great work, and they're doing work that I can trust. And that's how the trust is built. And that's how somebody could deliver me something right before I'm going on. And of course, I'm going to try to scan it, make sure there's no, problems with it. But where you would say, all right, this just in, a breaking news into the newsroom, da, da, da. And a lot of times you don't have time to process that because it's happening as you speak. So sometimes it might be the first time you're reading it, and you do need to have that trust with the person that's behind the scenes that you've worked with.
When it comes to breaking news, and you have been the lead in several of those breaking news, you're in front of the camera, you hear a heinous story. I'm going to go to what happened a couple of years ago when live on television, someone hand delivered Rachel Maddow a script to read. And she read it regarding children being captive, migrants being held captive and taken away. Their children are taken away from their families. She cried on air. Impartiality. And you're human. When the riots occurred in Chicago a couple of years ago, I can feel some of the anger in the reporting when some of the reporters were downtown saying, why you're doing this to our city? Why you're doing this? The human interest, seeing people saying, you're on camera, they're going to see you doing this. Is that being fair? Is that being balanced? The human side of, because people think we're not human. People think that we're not supposed to show emotions, get angry.
I think, first of all, if I reacted emotionally to every heinous story that I read on the news when I was doing it, I'd probably break into tears 2 or 3 times a newscast. There's some things that are just awful. And what I tried to do is, when it was breaking news situation or whatever the case may be, I tried to be as responsible as I could be. I tried to not let my emotions get the best of me. But if it's a horrible story, and I think, oh my gosh, that's a horrible story, I think you could maybe hear it in my voice or see it in my eyes or something of that nature. But I never want to assume, again, that, oh, we're all together on this, right? We all think this is horrible, even though it might be. The best compliment I could ever get from covering breaking news was, you were straight down the middle. You asked the questions of people, like in real time. That's why I always love doing breaking news, because you didn't have a script. You had to use your brain. And people would say, you asked the questions that I was thinking about at home. That's the nicest compliment they could give me, because I feel like I am the conduit for the people that can't ask those questions, that want to get to the bottom of something bad or sad or whatever the case may be. So I would just say, if I broke, if I got emotional every time something horrible was read over the air, I'd be in a basket case all the time. So you try to keep it together. But obviously, if it's very sobering or something really horrendous, it might show in your voice or something of that nature. But the thing about it is, and as it related to, say, the rioting, which I get part of it is like people seeing this city that they love so much, like burning and being looted and this and that. But I would work hard on finding somebody who was probably if you're doing it, you're not going to come on the news, but somebody that could speak to that frustration and explain why it's happening, because that gives it proper context. If you don't have that, if you just show people running around the streets and they're looting and they're causing mayhem, that's not giving it proper context. And I could see on a human level, certain people would say, oh gosh, this is our city and we just hate to see it happen. So on that level, I sort of get that. But the other side of it is you have to tell two sides of the story. You have to figure out what's causing all of that. If we ignore the root causes of that, then we're not doing our job. And that's the part of the story that you need to go look for answers on. Why is this happening? Why would people be doing this to this city that we all love? That's the other side of the story. And if you're going to do a credible job covering a big story, you have to go figure out both sides of it.
Some people who are analysts, news analysts, look at, and I know people look at sports and stuff like that. They want to become the Stephen A. Smith of news. They want to become I hate to say this, the Tucker Carlson of news. They want to be the Bill O'Reilly. They want to be the Roland Martin. They want to be these type of people. The however component is when I do this, a lot of people think I just plop in a chair and just run my mouth.
Well, I happen to see your notes in front of you, and you have copious notes in front of you. And I would say anybody that makes it look easy, I would guess people say, oh my God, they just got up there and, riffed or ranted or whatever it was. There's a lot of preparation that goes into that. So for people that think, hey, I just show up and ask Rob a few questions and then boom, we're done. I know that's not the case. And I hope that everybody that's listening understands that's not the case either. To your question about Stephen A. Smiths and the Tucker Carlsons and people like that, first of all, Stephen A. Smith gets paid a lot of money to give his opinion on everything, but it is sports. Tucker Carlson's totally different, or whoever you're thinking about from the left, because they're still shouting as loud as Stephen A. does, but they're taking a position on every story. I'm going to go far right. I'm going to go far left. And I don't care what anybody says. This is how I'm presenting the news. And I think we found, certainly in Tucker Carlson's case, a lot of the issues with Dominion and the lawsuit and things of that nature that, listen, he was the most watched guy on Fox. He was probably one of the best compensated people on Fox. But that can be a slippery slope as well. And, he's going to go do Twitter. Who knows what kind of following he'll get there. If he'll have as good a distribution, system that say a broadcaster would. But I mean, Twitter's got millions, there's millions of followers out there. So, but it is different than the sports. But I understand your point about he or she who yells the loudest. And those people have made a lot of money yelling loud, some in sports, some in news, some right wing, some left wing.
Many people want to learn how the newsroom works. Can you give us a breakdown to us so people will get a behind the scenes of how the daily operation of a newsroom works?
Well, let me first say that I haven't been in one for 4 years, so I don't want to sit here and talk about, hey, this is the way they covered the Brandon Johnson story today or yesterday, because I wasn't around for that. What I can tell you is that there's a lot of preparation. And if we're talking about the newsrooms that you watch regularly in this town, the main ones, I can speak to those because I worked in 2 of them. And people would always find it hard to believe, like, yeah, we really do care about the truth. We really do care about getting it right. And so there's lots of meetings. There's lots of editorial meetings. There's lots of production meetings. What's it going to look like? Editorially is, how are we going to cover this? And how are we going to, cover to be fair? And so that, I know people find it hard to believe. Sometimes you're like, oh, I watch the news. They're so biased and this and that. And what I've told people before, and this is the absolute truth. They'd say when you worked at the two stations you worked at in town, did corporate say you have to cover a story like this or cover a story like that? And I would say that never, ever happened. But for people who perceive bias, what I can say is that, and I've explained this to people before, I think there is geographical bias. So let's say there are 3 of the main newsrooms are in downtown Chicago, and you may live, and 60 or 75% of the people that are in that afternoon meeting happen to live within 3 miles of the station, and probably all their friends live 3 miles from the station, and there's a point of view of downtown Chicago that's there. And a lot of people would maybe espouse that. Not everybody that works in a newsroom is from downtown Chicago, by the way. I'm just saying for the people that do, I think there is a geographical bias because you get to you get to a point where everybody kind of thinks like you, and this is the city, and this is how it works down here. And so for that, I think I could never think of somebody who did anything intentionally that would be considered bias, ever. In the years I worked there. And again, I haven't been there 4 years. But I would say there is unintentional, at times, geographical bias based upon the reporter that's doing the story where he or she lives and who is their peer group and where they live.
Let's say, for example, does a relationship that you form with the newsroom plays a part in getting your story covered?
You mean you've developed alliances in the newsroom to get it done? Well, listen, if you're, first of all, having experience and being, answering the bell every day matters. So having experience, it's easier for somebody that's got 15, 20 years of experience to walk into an afternoon meeting and say, hey, I've got this great idea for a story based upon his or her longevity and the kind of work they've done. If you're a newbie, you walk in the afternoon meeting and you're like, ooh, I don't even know where the bathroom is yet in this building or something. You're new, and you're probably not going to have as much clout. The people that have developed those relationships that have been there longer are going to be able to have allies that say, yeah, that's a really good story idea based upon the work that person's done. So having experience, especially in a town like Chicago, matters because it's going to allow you to cover maybe more of the stories you want to cover, as opposed to being a newer person that gets assigned, hey, go cover that.
If people really, really know Rob Johnson, you are a big, big Blackhawks fan. You love hockey.
That's true.
I want to know your opinion about this season. I know it was a disappointing season. I know you're a little put your sports hat on about Jonathan Toews leaving. And what is your opinion?
Well, I actually, this was interesting because the night after the draft lottery that the Blackhawks won, I was doing the radio and I actually, texted Danny Wirtz, who's the CEO of the Blackhawks. I'm like, hey, will you come on and talk about this? And he did. And what I said then is what I'll say now. It was very frustrating to watch the Blackhawks pretty much admit, like, yeah, we're tanking. We're kind of going for the number 1 pick, who is a generational talent, Connor Bedard, who is my son's age, by the way. My son played against him first time when they were 10 years old. The kid is outstanding. He's unbelievable. He can change the fortunes of a franchise, just like Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews did when they came on the scene. Jonathan Toews had already been drafted the year before Kane. Kane was number 1 draft pick. They came in and they lit the place. I mean, the place was incredible. And 3 Stanley Cups in 6 years. And so there's a couple of questions that you're asking. The first one was, I hate to see a guy like Jonathan Toews battle health issues the way he has and to go out that way. I hated Patrick Kane, who is iconic. And I went to like his second to last or third to last game, and he had a hat trick halfway through the game. The Blackhawks were really bad this year. And he was unbelievable and just so fun to watch. So to watch two legends go, that's hard.
Do you think COVID played a part of it?
Well, apparently, and I'm not a doctor, and I'm not treating Jonathan Toews. I think COVID played a part, but by what I've heard and read, into some of the issues that he's had. But it's sad to see two legends go, but they gave us 16, 17 years of excellence, and to win 3 cups in 6 years is unheard of. And I'm so glad that my family and I were along for that ride and realized, and you're thinking, oh gosh, it'll just keep going. It's not going to keep going. It was outstanding. That said, and I told Danny Orts this when I was interviewing him, I'm like, hey, it paid off. This whole, hey, we're the bottom of the league, tough team to watch, all that. It worked out because the ping pong balls bounced in their direction, and they're going to have the ability to draft a guy like Connor Bedard who can totally change the way the team is. And they have an awful lot of draft picks too. I think 11 in like 7 rounds. They have a lot of draft picks this year, so they're going to be able to get a lot of good young kids who are not ready to play in the NHL, by the way. Some kids are going to go to college or play in their junior teams or whatever the case is. But getting the first draft pick this year to be able to draft Connor Bedard is a huge plus, and I think it's going to bring, if people left, it's going to bring him back, and it's going to restore their faith hopefully a little bit.
I was a big Buff fan. I wanted to know what happened to him.
Well,
we was talking about Big Buff during our days.
First of all, Big Buff was amazing because the guy was when he first came to the Blackhawks, he was a defenseman, and then they're like, hey, we need you to play up front and go stand in front of the net and make plays and do whatever. And he was good at that. He played forward and defense, and he was that good. And then he went to Winnipeg and played the Winnipeg Jets. And then he had some injury issues, and I think he's been out of the league for a little bit. But I mean, that guy was a beast. But I mean, think about that guy's like 6'4", 240, who looks like a ballerina on skates. That athleticism is unbelievable. And I always tell people, if you really want to figure out what a great game this is, you got to go in person because TV doesn't do it justice. These are big men playing, and they're hitting each other hard, and they have this skill to stop on a dime and change direction and do amazing things with the puck. But I mean, Big Buff was unbelievable because he could impose his will. He was physical, and yet he could skate really well.
You can also, when they fight, hear the punches, the stands.
And I know a lot of people will watch hockey for the fighting, but like when you see the playoffs, it hardly ever happens because they can't afford to have somebody get sent away for 5 minutes, 5 for fighting. I like the speed of the game. I like the skill of the game. I like watching it for those reasons, but I know a lot of people that aren't hockey people will go and be like, "Oh my God, they got into a fight." I love it. I watch the game for fighting, but most people that love hockey don't watch it for fighting.
You also play hockey. Tell us about
that. You know what? I've had, based upon my schedule, and in recent years, I don't play regularly anymore. And so I do miss it, but I just don't have the time. I used to play at lunch all the time. When I had a schedule that was like 2 to 10 and I could play from like 11 to 12:30 or 1, I could play all the time. And now, I'm downtown, a couple days a week or working from the home office or whatever the case is. And now I'm just so busy and I have a different cadence to my life that I'm not able to play. But I was just talking to my son about it today because he's 18 and he plays junior hockey. And I was like, when I was in hockey shape, I was in the best shape of my life. I'm still in good shape. I work out all the time, elliptical or spin bike or whatever. That's good. But being in hockey shape, there's nothing like being in hockey shape. I do miss playing, and I do miss the camaraderie of the guys and all that sort of thing too. But I was always an awful player because I started playing as an adult. But it's such a great way to get to exert yourself.
Your son is an author. Tell us about his book, and also how they can get.
Oh no! So I wrote a book 6-7 years ago. It was about a kid that gets a concussion. I was writing it about Jaden, who was 10 at the time, and it was called Timothy Trainer Head in the Game, and it was read by very few people because it brought up concussion awareness. That's one of the boards that I serve on, the Concussion Legacy Foundation, which is headquartered in Boston but has a great presence here. And so I wrote a book about a young kid that gets a concussion and how he fights his way back from it. And I just thought it was a great way, instead of giving speeches to kids who aren't going to listen to adults anyway, I thought it was a clever way to like write a story that's fiction, but that has a message with it. And like I said, I probably gave away more books than I sold, but it was a great experience to be an author and like to say, hey, I'm a published author. But I love doing it. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad that I raised an issue that's very important for people. And In typical fashion, though, parents and people don't always want to hear about concussions, because until it happens to you, it's like you don't want to hear about it. Like, it doesn't exist. I want my kid in the game and to get to play and this and that. And then once it happens, and it happens to me all the time, like, you sit there and try to get people's attention about it and they don't want to talk about it. But the minute one of my friends' kids gets a concussion, no matter, they could have fallen and hit their head on a rock. I mean, it doesn't have to be sports. Who do you think they call? They're like, hey, what doctor can I get in and see to assess my child? It's one of those issues that people care about only when it happens to them.
You also have a big heart for disabilities in Chicago. Tell us about that.
So I'm on the board of Special Olympics Illinois, which serves the entire state. And I was on the board when I was doing the news. I was on the board, but I would MC the event and maybe attend one meeting a year. And the one great thing about having my own schedule now and having a different cadence to my life is now for Special Olympics Illinois, I'm on the executive committee, obviously on the board. I run the marketing. I mean, I chair the marketing and communications committee. I have way more time to give to that now. And I have found, I think, as anybody would agree, the more time you put into something, the more you're going to get out of it. But I have a brother, Edward, that has Down syndrome. He lives in Arkansas. And I've been a true believer in Special Olympics for years because I saw what an impact it had on him. And it's been funny to have him come here and get introduced to people, because he doesn't know people in Chicago, for the 50th, which was 4 years ago. And then all of a sudden, my mom and dad got him. I think he started doing bowling and softball and things of that nature. So now he's, just turned 51, and he's still doing. He didn't do it for years, and now he's doing Special Olympics in Arkansas again, which is great fun. So I have a real soft spot in my heart for people with disabilities, and I love watching the athletes do their thing, watching them grow, not only as athletes, but as ambassadors for the cause. And they go nationally, internationally, and speak with very important people about the mission of Special Olympics. And so I've been on the board Special Olympics Illinois for probably 8 or 9 years now. But when I started to be able to control my own schedule and I could do more and contribute more, it became even better. And so I know next month they have the big state games in Bloomington Normal. And so I'm going to go down for like 2.5 days and go to meetings and meet with athletes and watch the opening ceremonies and watch a few events. And that's always
who's going to light the torch?
I don't know who's going to light the torch. We did torch run to the U.S. games last summer. So it started at Soldier Field. We had a ceremony where they lit the torch and then they ran it to various people, a lot of law enforcement, the law enforcement torch run, the law enforcement around the state of Illinois has been absolutely amazing in supporting this. And they're having Cop on a Rooftop to raise money for Special Olympics this Friday at Dunkin' Donuts everywhere. So that's their commitment has been excellent. But I would be lying to you if I told you I knew who was going to light the torch for the summer games in Bloomington Normal. But it's when you get around the athletes and you see how, it's not about winning and losing. It's about the camaraderie. It's about competing and the joy they get from it. I wish the rest of us I wish we could bottle that and give it to everybody else.
All right. So please give intellectualradio.com/iHeartRadio station how they can get in contact with you and your consulting company.
I appreciate it. My communications firm is Rob Johnson Communications. The business is RJ47 LLC. So you could go to www.rj47llc.com. That's the website. And you could always email me at robjohnson@rj47llc.com. That's the best ways to get a hold of me. Or if you have social, I'm on social media. I'm on all the channels on social media.
All right. Don't be a stranger. Brandy Moore said hello. Yeah, she said hello. So you can say hello to her.
Hi, Brandy. Thank you for even thinking about me. I appreciate it. And if you're listening, I hope you enjoyed this moment I had with my old buddy Roman here.
All right. Thanks to Earl Winfrey, our executive producer. Wanda, who's behind the scenes. You guys have a wonderful week.